Hi there. So is the government going to raise the personal tax allowance from 12,000 to 20s? Let's explore it.
Hello there. With the cost of living still a major headache, there's one big question that keeps coming up. Are we about to get a massive tax-free pay rise? Today, we're going to get to the bottom of it, and we're using a fantastic breakdown developed by the expert tax advisors at Pro Tax Accountant. Let's jump right in.
Right, let's start with a number. 5.2 million. What's that about? Well, that's how many new people the government thinks will be paying income tax by 2031. And it's all because of a policy most of us have probably never even heard of, but we're all definitely feeling. Stick with me, because this affects pretty much every single person earning a wage in the UK.
So the big idea that's been floating around is this. Should the government raise the tax-free personal allowance from where it is now £12,570 all the way up to £20,000? It's a really popular idea. You can see the appeal. But could it actually happen?
So here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll look at the £20,000 tax-free dream and where it came from. Then, we'll get into the government's very expensive £50 billion reason for saying no. After that, we'll talk about what's actually happening, something called the Great Threshold Freeze. I'll explain what this fiscal drag thing really is. And finally, we'll look at what all this means for your money, right up to 2031.
So, where on earth did this £20,000 idea come from anyway? Well, it wasn't cooked up by politicians. No, this one came straight from the public, and it was born out of the pressure cooker of the cost of living crisis.
A petition started doing the rounds, and it properly took off, getting over 60,000 signatures. The argument was dead simple, really. With rent, mortgages, and energy bills going through the roof, bumping up the tax-free allowance to 20 grand would give families a bit of breathing space. The people who signed it also made a great point. It would make work pay more. Encouraging more people to get a job if they got to keep more of what they earned.
And you can see right here why it was such a hit. Let's say you earn £20,000 a year. Right now, you pay tax on nearly £7,500 of that. But with this change, you'd pay absolutely no income tax at all. For millions of people on lower and middle incomes, that would be a huge, very welcome pay rise. It's a no-brainer, right?
So, the idea was popular, the logic seemed sound, but the government came back with a very, very firm no. And the reason for that no can be boiled down to one absolutely enormous number.
£50 billion. That's what the Treasury officially estimated it would cost. Not as a one-off, but every single year. And that, I'm afraid, is a massive hole to plug in the nation's finances. To get your head around a number that big, let's put it into perspective. A £50 billion tax cut is the same as slicing off about a quarter of the entire NHS budget. Or, look at it another way. It's about 80% of what the UK spends on defense every year. So the question for the government wasn't just, can we give a tax cut? It was, what do we cut to pay for it?
And this was the official line from HM Treasury, a hard no. They basically said that while they want to keep taxes low, taking 50 billion quid out of the system would threaten the funding for public services we all rely on. Hospitals, schools, and it could risk the country's economic stability.
Okay, so if the allowance isn't rocketing up to 20 grand, what is happening? This is where we get to the policy that's been quietly changing all of our finances. It's not officially a tax rise, but for your bank balance, it feels exactly like one. The policy is a freeze. Simple as that. The tax-free allowance was locked at £12,570 way back in 2021. It was supposed to be a short-term thing, ending in 2026. But then it was extended to 2028, and then it was extended again to April 2031. This means for nearly a whole decade, the point at which you start paying income tax isn't going to budge at all.
Now this freeze creates something that economists have a name for: fiscal drag. You'll really want to hear this part, because it's probably the most important thing to understand about your payslip for the next few years.
Let's make this really simple. Think of the tax-free allowance as a hurdle. You have to earn more than that hurdle before you pay any tax. Normally, as prices and wages go up each year, the hurdle gets a bit higher too. But with a freeze, that hurdle is stuck to the ground. So as your pay goes up, even if it's just a small pay rise to keep up with the cost of living, more and more of your money gets dragged over that fixed hurdle and into the hands of the tax man. It's a stealth tax.
And this is where most of us are feeling it. Let's take a real-world example, say a freelancer in Manchester. In year one, she earns £27,000. After her allowance, she pays just under £2,900 in tax. A couple years later, her income has gone up to £29,000, just keeping pace with inflation, so she's no better off in real terms. But because that allowance is frozen solid, her tax bill jumps up to nearly £3,300. That's an extra £400 she's paying in tax, from a pay rise that wasn't really a pay rise at all. That is fiscal drag in a nutshell.
So now we get how it works. What does it mean for the country as a whole? What do the official forecasts say this is going to do to all of our wallets right the way through to 2031?
Now this catches a lot of people out. When the freeze first came in, back in 2021, the government thought it would raise about £8 billion a year. But then high inflation came along and basically supercharged the whole policy. This chart from the Office for Budget Responsibility shows the reality. The freeze is now set to bring in tens of billions more than anyone ever expected. It's a much bigger money spinner for the Treasury than they originally planned.
And if we dig into the official numbers, the sheer scale of it becomes clear. By 2031, this freeze is on track to raise an extra £66.6 billion every single year. And you can see from this table, the lion's share of that, nearly £44 billion, is coming directly from freezing our income tax thresholds.
And that brings us right back to that number from the very beginning, 5.2 million. That's how many people are expected to be dragged into paying income tax for the first time. But hold on. That's not all. It's also forecast to push another 4.8 million people into the 40% higher rate tax bracket. And on top of that, another 600,000 people into the top 45% rate. I mean, these are truly huge, society-shifting numbers.
So, what on earth can you do about all this? It's the crucial question, isn't it? Well, you can't change government policy, but you can be smart about how you manage your own money. Proactive tax planning isn't just for the super rich anymore. Things like boosting your pension contributions to lower your taxable income, making sure you use your full ISA allowance every year, and planning your finances cleverly with your partner can make a real, tangible difference.
So, let's wrap this up. The dream of a £20,000 tax-free allowance? Well, it's just not on the cards. The reality is a long-term freeze until at least 2031, a stealth tax that's hitting millions of us. And it leaves us with one final big question to think about. As fiscal drag pulls more and more nurses, teachers, and skilled tradespeople into the 40% tax bracket, are we seeing a fundamental shift in what it even means to be a higher earner in the UK today?
Just a quick but very important note before we finish. Everything we've talked about today is for general guidance. Tax law is complicated and it can change. So for any advice that's tailored specifically to you and your circumstances, it's absolutely vital you speak to a qualified professional.
And if you'd like to get that professional advice, you can get in touch with the experts at Pro Tax Accountant who put all this analysis together. You can reach them on WhatsApp, give them a call, or just drop them an email. And please do subscribe to the Pro Tax Accountant channel for more updates just like this one. Thanks so much for watching.